think about the times in my career that I've been happiest, that I've enjoyed the most and probably performed the best. It's when you're within teams where there is diversity of thought, and whether that's cultural diversity, gender diversity, but vibrant, willing to think outside the box, innovative. And so for me, that's the business case for diversity, is that you build teams that are happier, you build teams that are more engaged, you build teams that perform better. You've got to have diversity, you've also got to have inclusion though, because you need to have mechanisms so that voices are heard, that voices and differences of views are incorporated in decision making and ultimately in the direction that you take teams. So you've got to have the two together. But it's certainly a winning combination when you do. But when I step back, I think you've got to have workplaces that are inclusive, that are safe, people are respected, and their voices are heard. And I think that's the frame that you need to make sure that you can attract people with broad diversity. And then you've got to have the pathways so that people have the opportunities, that those opportunities are shared evenly across the community. So avenues like the transferable pathways program that we did recently, where we were looking for non-mining industry diverse talent, and I was blown away, firstly by the response, but when we had a session a few weeks ago with the first cohort, just the skills and the views in the room were incredible, and seeing those people out in our business, you can already see the difference that greater diverse thinking, particularly with that fresh perspective from outside our industry. So providing a place where people want to work and engaged and included, pathways into the business. And I also think in terms of skills development, we've got to be making sure that we're attracting people to our industry, that we're providing the skills all the way back to schools, universities and the other avenues into our business, regardless of what they are. And so that's an area that we're putting a lot of focus in as well. Our business is changing. So digitalisation, decarbonisation, automation, it means our business today and when we look forward is fundamentally different than it has been before, and that opens up a whole range of opportunities for people that just weren't there before. Not everyone necessarily wants to be in the Pilbara. A lot of people do. That's fantastic. The changes to our business mean actually we can attract people from a broader range of skill sets, and certainly, I guess for my kids, it's the sort of jobs that they want. Automation, digitalisation, it's those things that they really want to be engaged in. And when I look at the breadth of careers that our business is now able to offer, it's so much more than probably in the past, and that means we can attract, I think, greater diversity into our business because the breadth of those opportunities is so much greater. I think that where we have not made as much impact is where we haven't been really clear on the horizon where we're trying to get to. We've focused on the nearer term, and we've made certain tactical measures, and maybe they've worked for a little while, but it's not holistic and it's not joined up with the longer term. And as a result, we've chopped and changed, we've done programs, drifted in and out, and we really need to set up, and I think we're much clearer now, where we're trying to be in 5 and 10 years, and we're working towards that. And so there's much more consistency in our approach. And I think it makes it much easier across our organisation as well, because people can see where we're trying to get to. They can see the short-term measures, but it's in the context of where we're trying to get to longer term. And so I think that works far more for people in our organisation, but I think there's a much more consistency to our message externally as well that I hope will cut through. So we're certainly changing the way that we're communicating. We're changing the way we're communicating internally, but also externally as well. You've obviously have a lot more measures now, whether that's social media, whether that's through the more traditional print and television media. You've got a lot more avenues to be able to reach people, and in fact, people aren't accessing the same news sources that they used to be. So in one way, that's a challenge. In another way, it's actually, you've got a lot more measures to really be able to reach in the way that people want to have that information. So certainly social media, we're increasing. I wouldn't say we're there yet in terms of how best to reach people, but it's certainly an area of focus. I think the other aspect that's really important is articulating the context behind, and I think where it hasn't worked as well in the past is where we've set targets, but we haven't articulated the why, we haven't articulated how that leads to a better business, and certainly I think when you provide that greater context, people can really lean into it and engage with it, and ultimately we've got to have everyone going in the right direction to really get where we're trying to. I think where we've really made incremental and really a step change, it's where people have really connected with the why. And I can see it when I go into a business and talk, and you can see sometimes people have that real epiphany around, that's what we mean. It's not just about targets and measures and numbers. It's about improving the enjoyment that we all have when we come to work. It's about getting better business outcomes. It's about being a much stronger business. And if you think about it, the world is changing so fast. You think about the last few years, some of the changes that we've seen, and you've got to be linked to that. You've got to make sure that you're really engaged as a business with the communities and the society in which you operate. And that means having as diverse a workforce as you possibly can and really listening to those voices, because things are changing so rapidly, and as soon as you get dislocated from that, you get left behind, and that means that your business is far more vulnerable without that diversity. I think it's all those things. I think it is sharing the why. I think it's providing the context. I think it's providing the pathway. I think it's giving people examples. And as we've got greater diversity in our workforce, one of the really good things that's happening over the last year or so is sharing some of those stories and examples. And that then takes it from something that maybe is a bit distant into actually human stories that people can connect to. And I think when you can internalise it like that and understand it, actually you can get on board and be a real agent for change as well. And the reality is it's going to be different for all of us how we reach that point. And so I think as leaders, one of the things that we've got to continue to do is finding those avenues to reach people in different ways, because what works for me may well not work for you. And so we've got to keep cutting it in different ways to really mobilise and take people on the journey with us. For me, the biggest difference in the last year is probably the openness with which we're having internal discussions. The release of the Broderick report for us was a real crystallising moment, in the sense of doing something internally, but then publishing it so that everybody can see. And that was really difficult, and it certainly meant we had some really challenging conversations. I guess one observation I would make is that has allowed a conversation internally to happen far faster than it would have otherwise. And just that openness to talk about it externally means there's far more openness internally to talk about it as well. And I've been really touched by some of the stories in the business of people having really hard conversations as groups, but actually conversations that mean that people are far safer, that there's far more inclusion, and that will drive greater diversity. And more diversity drives greater diversity. It's a virtuous circle. And so that's one of the things I think, for me anyway, within our business has really changed in the last year. One of the main learnings is that openness and willingness to have really open conversations, even if they're really challenging sometimes. I've been struck by both internally and externally. People are far more receptive to lean in and understand your situation, but also to help with it when you're being really open and having honest conversations. I think the second thing that really stands out, and it's something that you know, but I guess has really been demonstrated in the last few years, is just as a leader, the shadow that you cast, and thinking really carefully about that, because the signals that you send, deliberately or not, people carefully focus on, and they really take their cues from. And probably the third thing actually that sticks out for me is just the collaboration between different entities, including entities that you may be fierce competitors with, but the ability to actually collaborate on areas of common interest, because the world is changing so fast, but it's also increasingly complex, and you just can't do it on your own. And so reaching out to others, whether that's in your industry or beyond, that's probably the other thing that really stands out to me.